Let's move on. The president then pivots to the prosecutor general, who was fired by the Ukrainian government, and then to Joe Biden. Trump saying, quote, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the attorney general would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. Zelensky then tells Trump that he knows all about the situation and ensures he'll soon have his own hand-picked prosecutor in place, promising, quote, he or she will look into the situation, specifically to the company that you mentioned in this issue. The issue of the investigation of the case is actually the issue of making sure to restore the honesty. So we will take care of that, and we'll work on the investigation of the case. So, my God.
The money line in that section of the memo, Willie Geist, was where Donald Trump told the president of a foreign country who he was withholding defensive weapons from that he needed to coordinate not only with his personal lawyer on digging up dirt on Joe Biden, but that he needed to coordinate. It took my breath away.
It's incredible.
It's really shocking. It's shocking. You think after all of this time, we would all be incapable of being shocked. And yet Donald Trump says, talk to my attorney general. Talk to Attorney General William Barr.
This released by the White House.
Talk to my attorney general about digging up dirt on a domestic political rival while I'm holding up defensive weapons that are actually probably the only thing that would stop Vladimir Putin from going all the way to Kiev if he chose to. That you talk about, and by the way, that's bad. Would you like to know what is worse, Willie?
Please.
I think you already know what's worse. But this is just for the kids at home. It's a romper room thing. It's like I'm looking through a mirror. They want to know if I'm going to see them. And there's all this suspense building. You know what's worse? that William Barr gets this from the DNI. And what does he say? He doesn't say what every self-respecting lawyer that I've ever known my entire life would say, which is like, okay, this looks like the President of the United States is trying to put me in a conspiracy to work with a foreign power to smear one of your domestic political opponents. So I better recuse myself right now. In fact, I'm going to wash my hands like Pontius Pilate and run out of the building with my hair on fire. No, he doesn't do that. Instead, he kills the complaint and says, nothing to see here.
That's
really,
right.
That takes all of this. Like, Rudy Giuliani may remind us of a crazy uncle. When you get the attorney general involved, and then the attorney general looks like he's part of a conspiracy, and then he says there's nothing to see here, move along, suddenly this entire crisis is taken to a new level.
And it calls into question some of Attorney General Barr's testimony over the summer on the Russia matter, where he was asked time and again if the president had asked him to do anything inappropriate, and he said no. We have some of the details on this. Barr and Rudy Giuliani were mentioned 11 times in this phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. In one instance, the Ukrainian president told Trump, quote, one of my assistants spoke with Mr. Giuliani just recently, and we're hoping very much that Mr. Giuliani will be able to travel to Ukraine, and we will meet once he comes to Ukraine. The other mentions mostly by Trump telling his Ukrainian counterpart to expect a phone call. The first came after the president asked Zelensky to investigate CrowdStrike, that cybersecurity company that concluded Russia was behind the 2016 DNC hack. The president told Zelensky that Barr would, quote, call you or your people to get to the bottom of it. The next mention came when Trump told Zelensky that Giuliani and Barr would call to discuss what Trump called, quote, bad people involved with the firing of that Ukrainian prosecutor in 2016. Then, concerning Joe Biden and his son Hunter, Trump told Zelensky, quote, whatever you can do with the attorney general would be great. Again there, Jonathan Lemire talking about a political opponent bringing in the Attorney General of the United States on that question with a foreign leader.
It's an extraordinary thing to read, and for the White House to decide that this would be something that would help them to put out in public. I mean, it's one thing to ask your personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and that there are questions raised there about the appropriateness of his dealing with a foreign government. He has said that the State Department was helping coordinate his travel and his contacts with Ukrainian officials. The State Department has largely denied that. We have, of course, the Attorney General of the United States being involved with an investigation overseas in a foreign country, which goes to not just another norm, another rule, another guardrail this president has shattered, but to do so that raises all kinds of questions about the legality, and then to have Barr to not recuse himself from this matter going forward is extraordinary. And it goes to show you the lengths that the president will go to find sort of damaging information about Joe Biden. Even yesterday, as this scandal was swirling, after the memo was released, I was with a part of the press pool that was traveled with the president all day as he had meetings throughout the United Nations, including one with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and we pushed him on this, and he then, at that point, still suggested that he felt like there was corruption that Zelensky could root out, that he still should get to the bottom of the Biden matter, that it was not something he wanted to let go.
Jonathan, we watched the press conference. You were there yesterday at the UN with the president. To say he was all over the place, I think, would be generous, not answering the questions that were put to him. They thought, I think, putting out the memo was going to be helpful in some way, that it would clarify things and maybe even clear the President of the United States. Obviously, it's done the opposite of that. Is he, when you watched him up there yesterday, just watching on TV, was he tired, rattled, some combination of those?
Yeah, tracking his mood in the last 24 hours and his demeanor, watching him up close and personal, but also talking to people around him has been sort of really interesting. For a long time now, people around the president have welcomed the fight of impeachment. They have said this will be a political winner for him. But Trump himself has been a little leery, though he's bought into that political calculation. Personally, this is not something he wanted. He is someone who knows that if he is impeached, even if he were to win re-election, this would be the first line of his political obituary. He knows that the pressure over the next year plus will be immense. This is all that people will talk about, and there's no attempt to sort of enact any sort of agenda. And it'll be hard for him to do what he's so good at, usually changing the subject. He seemed defiant the other night, but yesterday, as the day went on, he had some interactions with smaller meetings with leaders. Then he was pretty fiery, and he had interactions with the press, calling us corrupt and fakers at certain times, and seemed pretty defensive. But by the time we got to that news conference, and I talked to people around him later, they said the president was sort of tired, he was worn out, that yes, he was angry, but usually we see Donald Trump angry at very loud volume. Yesterday was more of a sort of a seething, he was sort of, you could tell he was upset, and as one person close to him said to me last night, he's rattled about this.
Yeah, guys, and the other thing to point out, if you pull back and you look at this memo, ask yourself if there's anything in there where the president is advancing national interests. In other words, is there anything in there about the country, or is it just about the CrowdStrike conspiracy around 2016? Is it about finding the server from 2016? Is it about finding political dirt on someone he believes he may have to run against? It was a window into the way the president talks to foreign leaders. It was all about him and his election and his re-election.
Well, and that's one of the things.
This, according to the White House.
There's like something that a lot of conservatives yesterday were talking about. Conservatives that have been a bit more quiet in criticizing the president were talking about how shocking it was that nothing contained in there had anything to do with the best interest of the United States, that it was all about him. Benjamin Wittes, I wanted to ask you about the Attorney General's name coming up and that conversation.
Look,
that's a runaway beard truck careening off a cliff.
If you were Bill Barr, and let's assume that the Justice Department is telling the truth, and that the president said this to Zelensky, but then this order never gets conveyed to the Justice Department.
Right.
So he genuinely learns about it when he first sees the whistleblower. Right? But what he learns that day, sometime in August, right, is that the President of the United States is trading on the name of the Justice Department that he heads in an interaction with a foreign leader to extort the civil liberties violations of his political opponents. The day you learn that, you should say, I cannot head the Justice Department under the circumstances.
Have you ever met a government lawyer?
Have you
ever met a government lawyer in that position that would not recuse himself immediately? Because I have never met an attorney that would not immediately recuse himself. If the President of the United States suggested that the Attorney General was going to be part of this enterprise.
To me, there's an antecedent question to recusal. The issue is resignation. The day you're the Attorney General of the United States and the President of the United States is saying, in an interaction with a foreign leader, I am going to deploy the Justice Department to help me electorally by dishing dirt on my political opponents. You should not be Attorney General another day after the president has represented you that way. And so I actually get hung up a little bit earlier than the question. Like there is no, I don't understand how you think you are supposed to engage in honorable service consistent with your own oath once the president has talked about you that way.
So there's the shock factor there, but there are Republicans, there are Trump pundits going on television saying there is nothing to see here, literally nothing. With a legal eye, is there possibly nothing to see here?
Okay, so in one sentence, 5 impeachable, potentially impeachable offenses within that document, or at least things that Congress would want to think about in that context. In one conversation, the president, 1, threatened to misuse congressionally appropriated funds, to 2, extort from a foreign head of state, 3, an intervention in the U.S. political and electoral process, 4, through the mechanism of the gross violation of the civil liberties of 2 U.S. citizens, by 5, dishing dirt or extorting the dishing dirt of his political opponents.
Bad. You're saying that's bad.
I would say that there is something to see here.
Okay.
And again, that was the best case scenario, Ed Luce. The memo that the White House released kind of suggests why Republicans were stunned last night after what they saw in the whistleblower call.
That was, and it's pretty clear that Trump released this, insisted on releasing this against the advice of all those around him, including Mike Pompeo and others. The ellipses, though, are fascinating. You know, this Joe Biden case, I need you to do me a favor, though. If you can look into it, ... it sounds horrible. Those ellipses in this edited transcript, you know, suggest that there's a great deal more in that might come out in the whistleblower complaint later today.
We'll wait and see. Benjamin Wittes, thank you so much. Now you have to go. We've got so much more to get to, including a full wrap of how Capitol Hill is reacting to all of this. Plus,
I think you should ask for VP Pence's conversation, because he had a couple of conversations also. I could save you a lot of time. They were all perfect. Nothing was mentioned of any import other than congratulations.
really, President Trump floats the idea of looking into his vice president's phone calls with Ukraine.
If floats is the operative description.
He's throwing that out there.
Threw the vice president under the bus. Yeah, this is going bad for me. Jeez. You should see Mike Pence's phone calls.
So as we go to break, we want to show you that moment that we mentioned involving Chris Christie's prescient analysis of what spells out trouble for the White House. Listen.
If the President of the United States was encouraging a foreign leader to investigate a political rival, that is arguably an impeachable offense, isn't it?
We have to look at what the context is, George, right? So, for instance, if he's saying, listen, do me a favor, go investigate Joe Biden, that's one thing.
President Trump says, I would like you to do us a favor, though, asking for Ukraine to investigate matters involving the 2016 election meddling inquiry.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.